And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you happen to be in the world. It is 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time where I am, middle of nowhere, Georgia. Double secret location on double secret probation as we get ready to talk about the news or what's going on in the world today on Coffee Talk. And that is, of course, Coffee Talk Live or at Coffee Talk Live if you're looking for it on YouTube and you wanted to join the discussion as well as you can, because I can't actually hear anyone. I have to read their comments. Or Prepper University on YouTube, as well as at Coffee Talk Chat on Twitter, or Fistful of Radio, fistfulofradio.com. Podcasting out of Atlanta Monday through Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and Friday at noon. As I sit here surrounded by felines, and you see one of the kittens here grooming himself in the chair behind me. If you're able to see, for those of you who are only able to hear, you'll have to take my word for it. And unfortunately, the three of them, kitten number one, and then 2 and 3, who lost their mittens here, lost their mittens and lost their home because they were abandoned in the woods, will be going in for veterinary services tomorrow morning and then picked up again Friday. And I'll go ahead and acknowledge some of the people that are popping up in the conversational part of this in the stream in the comments section. And I do try to read as many comments as I can if I can keep up, so that people who are listening can get the gist of the conversation. I see Helter is here, D'Lo is here, Dragon, Chris Trapp, Boogers is here, Preparedness Veteran, RL30 is here, Semper Fi is here, Fluke Man is here, Bingo, Urban Angst is here, Bulldozer, and Doc Galt says he's just tuning in. That's great. I'm glad everybody was able to join us, and that's just some of the people that have chimed in on the chat section right there so far. And we will be jumping into the news here in a moment. And of course, the biggest thing in the news right now is what's going on in Israel, in that neck of the woods. It's really filling all of the feeds. Oh, yeah, that's right. Helter says it's Amazon Prime Day. Big deal. Amazon Garbage Day. Is there ever anything that you actually want? Is it a lot of electronic gizmos that are pretty much worthless that you could get on sale anytime? Just had to ask. Stars Wake is here. Columbus Day week. Yeah, Indigenous Peoples Day is what they're turning it into. Chris says Sleepy Joe hasn't publicly spoken. Well, he is in Massachusetts addressing the migrant crisis. That's what he's doing this week. And Merv is here. He says, how about address the Muslim extremists in New York? Not just New York, but every major city in every Western country. In Sydney at the Opera House, burning flags and throwing things and screaming. They're nuts. And Chris says lots of pro-Palestine riots in every Western Europe and Canada and American cities. Yeah, in Australia and in London and in Paris and everywhere else, spitting and throwing rocks and burning things. Spectre is here. And Booger says the only hood thing I got for my Prime Day was my Halo Bolt, well worth the investment. As we start to dive into the news, as promised, take a look at what's going on in the world, take a look at the few of the news clips and news snippets, topics of interest as we continue on. And these guys are still talking about Amazon. Fluke Man says, unfortunately, Amazon and eBay have pretty good stuff. Hard to avoid doing business with them, I see. And D'Lo says, what did I miss? Ads. Wow, yeah, I bet. And Monkey is here. As we go ahead and open up the first article, and of course, I always try to read through it, or as much as I can palate. Some of these aren't very well written. This is the American Insider. If it ever comes up. There we go. It says, Israel rains absolute hell on Hamas. Good. They should. They should do as much damage as possible. Because, of course, you remember, And this is the Middle Eastern concept, and it's hard for Westerners to understand. They don't attack military targets. They attack civilian targets. So even if you have an issue with Israel as a government, what's that got to do with its citizens? You're going to attack elderly folks and women and children because they're soft targets, and you want to humiliate your enemy. This is the concept. That's why they do this. And it's hard for Westerners to grasp that. It says the Israel Defense Forces are fighting back after hundreds of innocent people were targeted and killed by Palestinian Hamas terrorists. At least 800 people were killed in Israel in the surprise attack. 4 American citizens were killed. I heard it was 9. And other Americans were taken as hostages. The IDF attacked 2 high-rise towers, including the Palestine Tower, resulting in its collapse. Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel will take mighty vengeance for the Black Day. I tell Hamas you are responsible for the well-being of captives. Israel will settle the score with anyone who harms them, Netanyahu said. And they're not fooling around because they know how it works out there. Most people in the West don't. Residents of Gaza leave now because we will operate forcefully everywhere. The attack occurred roughly 1 month after President Joe Biden approved the release of $6 billion to Iran, which is a state sponsor of terrorism in the region. And that's an important point. And we talked about it before. He did that hostage exchange for Americans that were being held instead of taking them by force like most other U.S. presidents would have tried to do, except for Obama, who also made bargains and exchanges and deals. So he traded with them and released $6 billion to Iran with the solemn promise, please, Iran, please, that you will only use it for humanitarian purposes. And they agreed. And then right after they got the money, they said, screw you, America, we'll do whatever we want with the money. And here we are. Although funds were intended to be used for, here it is, humanitarian causes, no. We made a deal, and they broke that deal because it is culturally acceptable in the Middle East, in that tribal mentality, to screw over an enemy in a deal. And America is their enemy. Critics say the actual use of the funds cannot be properly audited. Of course they can't. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken said the U.S. is working to verify the American deaths and disappearance of Americans. A specific number was not provided, but Blinken alluded to several. And you know what's funny about this also? I don't know if anybody listens to Anthony Brian Logan. I was kind of surprised to hear him yesterday saying that this is not an America problem and that we should just mind our own business. When they're overseas in Iran and other Middle Eastern countries, and when they're in European countries, in Spain and in England and in France and Canada, and even on U.S. soil, chanting death to Israel and death to America, it is an American problem. When they've killed Americans and they have American hostages, it is an America problem. And it will find its way here. There are enough of them here. You see them in the streets cheering and burning flags and throwing things now. There's enough of them out there. They will bring the problem here. They will make it an American problem. So yeah, you know what? We got to get involved whether we like it or not. All People is here. Thanks for joining us. Chris says the Quran says to smite the necks of non-believers. 11 dead Americans now, I think. And he says Iran funded this. And Preparedness says bust a deal, spin the wheel. Basically. And Chris says there's a video of Iran Parliament chanting death to America. And then you got guys like Anthony Brian Logan, who apparently doesn't get it, doesn't understand. Well, most people in the West don't understand how this works, why they always target civilians, why they have these grudges that they bear for generations. They're fighting about the same thing for hundreds, even thousands of years. Why they will make a deal and sign a contract and then screw you over a week later. And they are like, I don't understand. We don't understand why they happened. And then they say, oh, well, we need to broker a deal. No, you can't broker a deal with people like this. You have to give them a show of force or they won't respect you. It's as simple as that. If you give them a strong enough show of force, real force, not like what we did in Iraq when we went there and bombed the hell out of it and walked away and left a mess for them to fight amongst themselves over. You know what I mean? Chris says there's a video of Iran parliament chanting death to America. And he says Muslims are heavy in US, Canada, France, UK, Ireland, and Sweden. Yeah, and especially in the US and especially in Great Britain, because many of them are illegal. We've got them coming over our southern border and don't know who they are or where they are. And they're not vetted at all. Now, all of a sudden, Biden wants to close the border. Well, it's a little late for that, Jack. You know, Sleepy Joe missed the train on that one. Missed the train. As we pop into this one, just to make the point, this is from the Telegraph. Mobs cheering Hamas on the streets of Britain have proved Suella right. And I'll read the article. It'll make the point for itself. When Suella Braverman declared last month that multiculturalism has failed, multiculturalism will always fail because you're bringing people into the country or allowing people to illegally enter the country without integrating into society properly. All they do is carry their baggage with them and force you to deal with it. They never become part of the whole. They try to chip away at the whole and ruin it. Liberal commentators rubbished her. Of course, multiculturalism hasn't failed. Why? The Home Secretary was living proof of its success. She was the daughter of 2 immigrants, and now here she was occupying one of the highest offices in the land, a clear triumph for multiculturalism. Yeah, you think so. All that is political bullshit. Or so these liberal commentators tried to argue, yet they'd completely misunderstood what Miss Braverman was saying. If they still don't get it, perhaps they could reflect on the scene in certain British cities over the weekend after the terrorist attacks by Hamas on the people of Israel, because those scenes perfectly illustrate her point. On Saturday, Rachel Riley, the star of Countdown, was in action on West London when she witnessed something disturbing. I just passed 2 cars driving with Palestinian flags flying from each window, bouncing up and down on the cars, seemingly celebrating like they were having a party. She wrote on social media. That's an accurate description. Then on Sunday, as hundreds of pro-Palestine activists marched through Manchester, one attendee said she was full of joy and pride at what had happened. And at a similar demonstration in Brighton, a woman described Hamas attacks as beautiful and inspiring. So it's beautiful and inspiring to murder women and children and to use them as human shields and take them hostage. That's beautiful and inspiring. Just asking for a friend. And this is where we're at. And by the way, they're trying, London is getting concerned about it now. Finally, it's taken you a few years, Londonistan. And they're saying that because they are championing a terrorist attack, that those demonstrations are technically illegal. And so Great Britain is kicking around the idea right now, right at this moment, of getting heavy-handed with it, with law enforcement, to break those demonstrations up. They're going to find that to be a lot more difficult than they think. A lot more difficult. Helter says there's been discord and strife in the Middle Eastern states for centuries, longer than that, all the way into the Bible days. Chris says, I saw multiple Syrians at the southern border. Spectre says something to keep in mind. These infiltrators and sleepers could dress up like our military and law enforcement. That is a good point. Rodney says any attempt at negotiation with these Islamist extremist groups is seen by them as infidel weakness. True. Rock Valley said the reason they kill civilians is the same reason lunatics shoot up gun-free zones, easy targets. Chris said Muslims don't integrate, they only want Sharia law. Or their version of it, because they can't even agree with each other. Fluke Man says, funny, the left shrugs when non-white terrorists attack civilians, but terrorists like IRA were hated to the bone. And Gary is here. Thanks for joining us. Helter says, America and Europe hurt their cultures when they let people who have no intention to assimilate, and now they're paying the piper. And it can go on and on. Chris said they multiplied multiple Palestinian supporters in New York City yesterday, and they said they are American citizens but don't care about America. Then they should, or interviewed, he meant, but then they should leave. And this is, if you're out there doing that, you need to go, because America is a target. America's on that list. Sorry, ABL, you're wrong. It is our problem, whether you like Israel or not, because they will bring it here. All people said, always remember Braverman, Sunak, Pate, etc. were appointed to their positions. They're essentially diversity hires. That's a good point. And preparedness says law enforcement here is a joke. And then Chris said they'll burn down the cities like they did in Paris. Let them. Maybe that's the only way anybody's going to learn. Maybe that is the only way anyone is going to learn. They're doing it at the Sydney Opera House. They're out there in front of the Sydney Opera House, burning flags, throwing shit, throwing bricks, or whatever they can get their hands on, screaming and yelling, death to America, death to Israel. Again, this is another incidence where trying to be really, oh, look how progressive we are. We're going to help the world. Yeah, Australia, look at the fix you're in. You're going to really feel that way when they start burning the place down? Because it'll happen. It'll happen. Try to break those protests up. See what happens. And that's another point on there on Chris. He says they'll burn the cities down like they did in Paris. I think Paris has been burning for about 7 years now. Dragon says so much for diversity is our strength. It's not. The politicians in this country should have known that uncontrolled migration would lead to civil unrest. And Urban says, I notice many Canadian news are calling the Hamas terrorists militants. Yeah. Yeah, you could. I guess that's one way to reword it. And Fluke Man says immigrants don't want to mingle with their host nations, and it's the same as an invasive species. And again, if you came here and you really wanted to build something, and you wanted to be a citizen, and you wanted to learn the language and learn the culture, that's fine. But what they're doing is coming to the United States, to Spain, to France, to Italy, to Great Britain, Australia, New Zealand, wherever they're going in the Western world, and bringing all their baggage with them and make it a mess. And then Spectre says, if you start seeing brick bills or on pallets, get out of there ASAP. Oh, I see what you're saying. If you see pallets full of bricks. Oh, and like with BLM, and by the way, BLM supported this publicly. They supported the Hamas publicly, the BLM. So we'll see how long it takes before they're attacked, because you do not stand with them. You're as much an enemy as anyone else in the United States, BLM. You're not getting on the good side of anybody. Doc says evil prevails when good men do nothing. And Monkey said every politician that says diversity is our strength should be ashamed at this point, because now they will say Islamophobia or they will ignore it, which makes them anti-Semitic. As we continue on in here, and some politicians putting their foot in their mouth all the way up to their knee, as you'll see here momentarily. And some of these politicians are backpedaling, by the way, already. Monkey said that it's a lose-lose for those that say diversity is our strength. This comes from Meaw, MEAWW. It says calls grow for Ilhan Omar, AOC, Cori Bush, and Rashida Tlaib to be expelled from Congress, because these people, these four in particular, you see their pictures, have been very, very pro Hamas, even after the attack, although two of them have backpedaled now. I know for sure AOC has. AOC completely did a 180 now after they started calling her out. But these four, I mean, to the point of, like, I think a couple of them even hung Palestinian flags at their office. It says, reading into the article, Washington, D.C., in a stark divergence from the bipartisan support typically seen in Congress regarding U.S.-Israel relations, members of the Squad, a group of far-left House Democrats, have ignited a controversy with their statements on the ongoing Hamas attack on Israel. The Notorious Group, which includes Representatives Cori Bush, Jamal Bowman, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and Ayanna Pressley, Ilhan Omar, and Rashida Tlaib, has sparked calls for their removal from Congress and has drawn condemnation from some of their own party colleagues. Maybe they'll finally get voted out. I don't know how they keep their jobs. They don't do anything but run their mouth. It says Representative Cori Bush of Missouri stated that the United States should cease its support for Israel military occupation and apartheid. Her comments reflect a growing sentiment within the progressive wing of the Democratic Party that views U.S. support for Israel as problematic and in need of reassessment. But they don't see problems with any of the other countries we give money to, huh? Meanwhile, Representative Jamal Bowman from New York called for an end to Israel's blockade of Gaza. Yeah, now you see why they do it. He argued that the blockade exacerbates the suffering of Palestinians in the region and that addressing this issue is critical for achieving peace and stability. They were given, and again, I brought it up yesterday, if I remember this correctly, many, many years ago, a lot of what was surrendered to Gaza in the first place in part of Israel's deals with pretty much everybody was a lot of very fertile farmland, and they burned it all down in protest, and then were left with no food. That was their fault. Palestinians did that to themselves. Representative AOC and Ayanna Pressley from New York and Massachusetts, respectively, called for an immediate ceasefire and de-escalation in the ongoing conflict. They expressed concerns that Israel's military action could lead to further loss of life, you think, and suffering among Palestinians in Gaza. Well, so far, to my understanding, since Israel's retaliation, they have killed more than 1,500 armed men in their pushback. 1,500 armed men in their pushback. As I read a couple more of these comments here really quick, catching up. Oh, Stacy has joined us today. Thanks for joining us, Stacy Lynn. Rodney says the open border policy enacted by many Western governments is leading to the dissolution of the Western nations. It is. And Chris said it's funny seeing all the queers for Palestine supporters. Yeah, I know, because in Palestine, they would be hung or they would be dropped from a rooftop. I think that's typically how they handle homosexuals and lesbians. And Spectre says, a side note, I have two favorite YouTube channels, and you and Bear are tied. Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. All People says Muslims, Africans, Caribbeans hail from domination cultures that teach them to dominate over and not assimilate to any place wherein they migrate. Chris said Rashida Tlaib has Palestine flag in her office. That's right. And never forget that Ilhan Omar married her brother. Oh, that's dirty. That's not biblical. That's a sin. Urban says, uh-oh, my comment was flagged. I guess the Planet of the Apes lingo is not allowed. Really? You got a flag? And again, you know, I don't typically mess with the comments. So that's ScrewTube doing that. Doc says the squad has been long overdue to get their asses canceled like a postage stamp. There's some old school lingo. H12 said, I remember a picture of Omar in her office. She had a huge picture of bin Laden on the wall behind her desk. Wow. Semper says, just caught the article about BLM supporting Hamas. Absolutely disgusting. Yeah, I said that. I was just talking about that because they did. They're in support of it. And again, you're supporting the attack of soft targets. I'll reiterate, if you have an issue with Israel, okay, fine. That means you have an issue primarily with their government. And that's typically the case. Whatever problem you have with another country, it's their government most of the time. They attacked civilians, women, children, and elderly, and took many of them hostage. I mean, men were killed as well, but those were the primary targets because that's how that's done. That's how that's done, unfortunately. And an argument has been made, and I saw this on Al Jazeera's website. Al Jazeera said that Palestinian people are not subhuman and they shouldn't all be looked at this way. take a look at the protests that are going on. I'm not saying they're subhuman, but there is a one think mentality because that's how these people are raised. It's not like in the Western world where you half-ass care about something, and even if you protest, you're really not going to do anything. They will jump on board if given the opportunity. Man, woman, and child, young and old, will jump on board because there is one concept. One concept. It's part of that tribal mentality. It's part of that analogical thought process. And Westerners don't grasp that. All people says always remember the entire squad hail from migrant families, parents that arrived to take over and have no loyalty. Dragon says the Israeli occupation of Palestine is apartheid. Chris says Joe is at podium now. Here we go. Oh, God. And Monkey says if BLM supports Hamas, doesn't that make BLM a terrorist cell officially? According to the FBI, I think so, but it doesn't mean anything will be done about it. And Urban says, never ever heard of Israel taking civilian hostages ever. Because they're mostly westernized. They've got a Western mentality, but they know how to deal with the Middle East. And that's why you gotta kind of turn your back now well, while they clean up. Because a show of strength is the only thing that people in that part of the world will respect. That's why stuff like this didn't really happen under Trump, because they didn't view him as a pushover. Biden, pushover. They don't care what he says. Helter said, send Rashiva Tlaib and the rest of the squad to the Gaza Strip to fight. Send them there to protest. Send any of these people to these other countries to protest. It's real easy to sit in safety and comfort in the United States, in Great Britain, in France, or anywhere else in Canada, and protest what goes on in these odd pockets of the world, in the Middle East and in the Far East and in third world nations and places like that, and sit there and, oh, they're not fair to women, and oh, they're not fair to gay people, and blah. Go down there and try that, where they execute people for even talking about it. Try that. Fluke Man says, if I'm not mistaken, when Black Panther was created, it was fighting for their rights, not like the racist BLM in 2023. Can you give us a quick example of what were the group like at the time? What BLM? Oh, Black Panthers? The Black Panthers? They were always kind of a militant group, though. And they had a lot of splinter cells that were very racist against everybody who wasn't black. But primarily, the majority of the groups just wanted an equal or level playing field in states where it wasn't allowed. And you had like the peaceful type of protests that you saw from Martin Luther King, which were actually very successful. And then you had groups like Black Panthers who were far more aggressive about it and gotten a lot of trouble for it. But they would not, at the time, I don't believe even the most hardcore of them or the most racist of those groups agreed to destroying their own neighborhoods, destroying their own businesses, driving commerce away from their neighborhoods. You know what I mean? And the BLM is not above that. They're out there destroying their own neighborhoods, burning down their own stores. And then they have the nerve to complain about it like someone else did it. Urban says, Ilhan Omar, some people did something. All people says, interesting how Joe Biden waited until he let enough radical American hating males of war fighting age arrive before he decided to try and take action. Yeah, it's going to be hard now. Ali says, didn't the Supreme Court rule government accounts can't turn comments off? The official White House channel has comments off. I don't remember, but I do know a lot of times comments are suspended on anything official White House because it's a lot of negativity. People do not like them. What is this? I got this on here twice. But that's okay. I'm not sure if the Supreme Court said that, but yeah, I mean, it is a violation of your free speech. They are And you can make all your arguments because, again, we are on a private platform and you've signed contracts for its use and everything else. And they don't want the negativity there because a lot of people don't like Biden, even though we're supposed to still pretend like he's the best thing since sliced bread. And he invented sliced bread, by the way, and the Model T and fire and fishing lures. He invented the espresso. He was there. I saw him. This photographic evidence. Chris says, Joe says 14 Americans dead. Okay. And probably more taken hostage because, there's a lot of tour groups. And this is the season for it, too. There are tour groups from America in Israel now. You know what I mean? And Chris again says, I'm surprised he hasn't stuttered or collapsed. Give him a moment. He'll fall down. Or he'll repeat himself, or he'll get confused somewhere. Or maybe, prediction time. Perhaps he will take his microphone and walk away from the podium, and you're in trouble because then he'll start blithering on about how his son died in Afghanistan, and we all know that never happened. Well, that's a cat toy, by the way. This is one of Daniel's favorites right here, this little ball. That's what'll happen. Chris says he just said there are American hostages. I figured with all the tour groups in this time of the year. Chris said they probably had to memorize this all weekend. No, he doesn't memorize anything. He reads a teleprompter, barely. And that's why he's squinting so hard because he can't see. And he's like, you got to believe me. I'm telling you the truth. And he stands here like a piece of wood. He looks like one of those automatons from the 1700s. Shifting gears just slightly, because this is contributing to a lot of the problems in the United States right now. USA Today, Walgreens pharmacies stage walkout just weeks after similar action by CVS. The strikes all over the country, it's out of control. The strikes from all over the country are out of control. And many of them are decent because it's pharmacists that are doing the walkouts. It's decent middle-class jobs that eventually these companies are going to look to replace because of all of this striking that's going on. After many of these companies are just starting to recover from the shutdowns from the C virus pandemic. Here we go. Just 2 weeks after dozens of CVS pharmacists protested unsafe working conditions by walking off the job in Kansas City, Walgreens pharmacists followed suit with their own walkout Monday that left stores shuttered or short-staffed across the nation's second largest retail pharmacy chain. The organizer estimated that several hundred pharmacists and pharmacy technicians participated in the protest, which will last through Wednesday. Walgreens spokesman Marty Maloney, phony baloney, downplayed the impact of the walkout as minimal, but declined to specify how many staff or stores were involved. Take your prescription someplace else. They all charge the same amount anyway. A small number of our pharmacies are experiencing disruptions, and we apologize for any inconvenience, Maloney said. We are working to return the pharmacies to regular operations as quickly as possible. Nearly all of our 9,000 locations continue to serve our patients and customers. 9,000 locations. What the hell? That just drives me nuts. It's like everywhere you go in America. George Carlin said something about it, didn't he? He says you go from one town to the next and you can't tell the difference if it wasn't for the signs because they all have the same shit. Oh, look, a McDonald's. Oh, look, a CVS. Oh, look, a KFC. It's the same stores over, and they all look the same. They're all designed exactly the same. No originality. And they all look sterile. Some of them, if not for the signage, you couldn't tell one building from the other. Catching up a couple of comments here. Chris says, yeah, his eyes are barely open. That's because he's squinting. Even with the contacts, he can't see. And the teleprompter is gigantic. It's not like the usual one that looks like looks like this. It's just a small thing that's up there at an angle. His looks like a flat screen television. It's massive. It's like an 85-inch screen, and he still can't read the damn thing. Urban says it won't be over for Britain until or Biden, excuse me, until he mistakes the microphone for ice cream cone and tries to eat it. Yeah, I'm waiting for it. All People says Black Panthers were imported to the U.S. from the Caribbean, where the violent Black Power movement that usurped the peaceful civil rights movement was created. And Bulldozer had the VA on the phone. I'm surprised you're back. Chris said, over 50 years ago, as a young senator, I visited Israel. I visited Israel for the first time and had a long, long trip just before the Yom Kippur War. Was walked outside the hallway outside of her office, and that's Joe. Oh, okay. Really? Did that happen? All People said the Bloods and Crips street gangs are branches of Caribbean street gangs imported from the Caribbean to the U.S. Chris says, wow, he just walked away, didn't answer a single question. Speech, maybe 5 minutes. Yeah. So I wonder if that's true, if that's going to turn out to be another lie, Chris. Because everything else he's talked about, convincing Strom Thurmond about civil rights was a lie. Never met the man, as far as I know. About going to ground zero of the after 9/11. He says I was there the next day. That was a lie. He saw the plane hit the Pentagon from the train when he was en route. That was a lie. I mean, his son died in Iraq. That was a lie. It goes on and on and on. It's like every story he tells. I wonder if he actually was in Israel, if or any of that other stuff. I'm waiting for it. I know it'll get fact checked very shortly. Dragon says during the shutdown, Walgreens quality took an absolute nosedive in every way. Walgreens will lose my business. There are plenty of companies like Walmart willing to fill prescriptions. Everybody is. Everybody is. I encourage people actually to look for a mom and pop. If there's very few left. Look for a mom and pop pharmacy. You'll get much better care. You'll be supporting an independent business. And again, the prices are the same everywhere. I don't care. I know they advertise all these stupid apps. Oh, I use this app and I get a better price. And nobody gets a better price. And no pharmacist, if you get a prescription for a name brand medication, every pharmacist in the country is going to say, there's a generic for that if you want it, if it's available. You know what I mean? Semper says, are we surprised he didn't take a question? He can't think for himself. Of course, he's not going to take questions unless it's prearranged. And he's even admitted that. So, and Loyal Tangi says he sure was very fluent in his speech about sending billions to Israel. Never heard him so clearly spoken, not saying much for the average person. We can't afford it. I'm for that because I know how it works in the Middle East, but we still can't afford it. Where's that money going to come from? Where the hell is that money going to come from? It's just too much. I mean, we're already putting billions into the Ukrainian money pit as it is, and then that's in question. Like, I mean, has anyone else heard anything about the Ukrainian president's wife and her $1.1 million New York Cartier shopping spree? Because I know that one was up in the air. And it was in the news for like a heartbeat and disappeared. And Chris says basically funding both sides of the war and funding Ukraine. We can't afford all of that. And the Warden is here. Thanks for joining us, Warden. Helter says many a Walgreens worker I've spoken to sure has time to talk to their coworkers any time of the day. Mom and pop stores appreciate you so much more and make getting meds so much easier. Another thing about it too is being in the Atlanta area. And when I was still working for the mental health facility, and that was during the lockdown because they couldn't lock us down. You know what I mean? It's mental health, and had to go to a Walgreens with a couple of clients. Okay, they were supposed to get a certain shot. I forget what it was for. Well, Walgreens was going to do it, and all of the staff. All of the pharmacy staff, I should point this out. This is when they were still doing the mask mandate thing. So we all had to wear a mask coming into the Walgreens. And I never wore it anywhere else. I never even wore it in the facility. And the state said we were supposed to, but I didn't give a shit. And nobody was going to say anything to me. But anyway, all of the pharmacy staff was wearing a BLM mask. Or it said Black Lives Matter on it. It didn't say BLM. It said Black Lives Matter. They were all wearing that. And I remember while I was there, there was a person, it was like an older lady, 70s maybe, 70s, white lady. And she started coming up to the pharmacy and she was standing there looking. And then she turned around and walked away and got out of line and left. And I think she was intimidated by that. I think she was intimidated by that. Now, talking about Walgreens just reminded me of that. And I don't think Walgreens, the company, should have allowed them to do that. It's ignorant anyways, but I don't think that Walgreens should have allowed them to make political statements with their clothing while they were on duty. You know what I mean? Just an opinion. Just an opinion. As I catch up a few more of these comments. And if I miss anybody's comment, I apologize. Sometimes you fall behind. Monkey says, where are the people that are blaming Biden for indirectly funding Hamas from that Iran prisoner swap? Yeah, and that was brought up in the first article I read, that they got an extra $6 billion from that prisoner swap. And that the Biden administration made them cross their fingers and cross their heart and promise, cross my heart, hope to die, stick a needle in my eye. We're going to use it for humanitarian purposes. We signed the paper and everything. We signed a paper, so it must be true. And then like a week later, the president of Iran is like, we'll do whatever the hell we want with the money. Screw Biden. Screw America. Bingo says, have you seen the video that was posted on X recently about Biden giving a speech about leaving weapons and them being used on his and our grandchildren someday? No, I didn't see that. I don't think I saw that. Chris said CNN is mad Biden didn't tell the Jews to have restraint. I don't blame them. They need to, again, one thing that they do understand in an analogical thought, tribal society, and I got to bring that up as often as possible for people who missed it, because in Western thought, in the Western world, you have rational, logical thought, and it's a very different thought process. You're playing chess and they're playing checkers. Believe me, it's all about attrition. They will respect force. If Israel flattens that entire city, they'll think twice next time. But if they pussyfoot around, they'll keep it up. Paul says, hello from New Jersey. Keep up the good work, staying frosty, my friend. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Stars Wake says, do Black Lives Matter because they are black? That's what they think. That's what they think. And that's why they had that other slogan, all lives matter. But then people who said all lives matter were attacked for it. So I guess they don't. Cat lives matter. I'm going to put that on a t-shirt. Cat lives matter. You see my little friend? For those of you who are watching, you see my little friend sleeping in the chair there. He goes to the vet tomorrow. Chris says Black Lives Matter supporters are violent. They proved that by burning down police stations and businesses in their own neighborhoods. And Urban says, I consider BLM to be domestic terrorists. It's not surprising that they sided with Hamas. And Chris said the reporters tried to ask Biden about the Iran $6 billion and he walked off the stage. He won't answer that. That was an embarrassment. And again, now they have even less respect for the United States. You paid us for a prisoner swap? You paid us? You're morons. If they had gone in there and attacked and kidnapped back the prisoners, even if they lost them all, it wouldn't happen again for 20 years. If it was total collateral damage and we didn't get them, the Western world would be like, oh, you botched it. You could have made a trade and you got those Americans killed. You saved 100 other Americans in the future. I know that sounds terrible, but that's how they think. They'd be like, oh, damn, they're that serious? Maybe we got to think about that next time and not kidnap any more Americans for the next few years, huh? Urban says the UN made a statement implying that Israel should turn the other cheek. Asked the Christians in Lebanon how that's been working out for them. No kidding. Great point. Armin said, what do Russia, China, and Middle East have in common? No blue-haired people. Yeah. And all people said sick of retail stores politicizing themselves, and their staff absolutely and utterly refuse to buy anything in any such stores. And Chris says, I think all this weak leadership is helping grow support for Trump. And that's a great point. That's a great point, too. Because, again, it's like Reagan. People didn't want to screw with Reagan either, because they were like, oh, Reagan is going to make a mess if we do anything too stupid. And so you got to be careful. You can tell who's weak and who's a pushover. And Biden looks like a pushover. Obama looked like a pushover. Look at the deal he did to get that one soldier back. And that guy was a defector. Next article here, tying in with strikes. Associated Press. Auto workers begin to strike at GM plants in Canada. So yeah, it's contagious, folks. Toronto. Auto workers walked off the job at 3 General Motors facilities in Canada early Tuesday after failing to reach agreements with the automaker. Their union, Unifor, represents more than 4,200 workers at the plants. They had warned that they would begin a strike if no agreement was struck with GM by midnight local time. We made some progress throughout the day, but sadly not enough. Unifor President Lana Payne, pain in the ass, told reporters. She said the union was still speaking with the company, but there was a lot of ground that needed to be covered to reach a tentative agreement. The action came after Unifor workers ratified a new 3-year labor contract with Ford last month. They are seeking a similar agreement with GM. This strike is about General Motors stubbornly refusing to meet the pattern agreement. The company knows our members will never let GM break our pattern. Not today, not ever, Payne said. She said GM was not meeting the union's demands for pensions, support for retired workers, and steps to transition temporary workers to permanent full-time jobs. We are not there yet, so as a result, we are on the picket lines, Payne said. Yeah, if they're temporary workers, then why bother to transition them? A lot of times, factories that have temporary workers, it's part of a tax agreement with whatever municipality they're attached to. I saw a lot of that at the Frito-Lay when I worked there in Topeka, Kansas, that they had to maintain a certain tax status. They would bring in a certain amount of temps at peak times during the season with the understanding that they were temporary, that there was, if a job was available, they could apply for it. And if they qualified, they could get it. And that did happen. But you can't give every temp a job. They're only doing it to maintain a tax break. And I'm wondering if that's what this is. So yeah, everybody wants to strike. You got 4,200 workers at the GM plants. I bet you they can get a few more robots in there and strike about 1,000 of them. I bet. And the warden made a $9.99 donation to the channel. Thank you, Warden. He says, keep up the good fight, brother. I'm trying. I know I'm mostly preaching to the choir, but you never know. Maybe someone will hear it. Maybe a bulb will come on. You know, I'm not right about everything, but I try, and I will at least give an honest opinion about what I feel about what I'm reading or talking about. You know what I mean? But I appreciate that, Warden. Thank you again. Nature Nerd says Ben Shapiro showed video footage about the messed up genocide that happened in Israel. The Palestinians are evil and they have two legit claims to their land now, as far as I'm concerned. Okay. And Chris says Black Lives Matter support Palestinian violence because they refer to Americans and Israelis as oppressive colonizers. Also, there's a big thing in the Black community about Hebrew Israelites or Israelism now. You've probably seen that. That's all these American Blacks who claim that they are the real Jews and that their heritage was stolen. And I've seen many transitions with groups like this over the years. I remember when everybody was African. And remember this in the 80s? Everybody was African, but it was always a tribe that a big tribe that you heard of, like Zulus or something. Then everybody was the descendant of Egyptians. even though there were black people in Egypt and there was even black leadership in Egypt for a short time in biblical days. It was a very short-lived stint in Egypt, but that doesn't mean you're all Egyptian. You see where I'm going. Then everybody was Blindian, okay? In the early 2000s, everybody was Blindian. Oh, I'm Indian too. I'm half Indian. And it was always a big tribe. It was always, I'm half Cherokee, I'm half Navajo, never some minor tribe like a Massachusetts or something like that, right? Now they're Jews. And I've run into a couple of people like this, and they're very staunch about it. Oh, they stole our heritage. They stole. We're the real Jews. We're the real Israelites. This and that, and you see a lot of that now, and that some of these BLM people are tied into that as well. And the funny thing is, there's a quick way to shut them down. You'll make them real mad, so watch it. But one question will shut down a Hebrew Israelite instantly. Hold on, I'll read a couple more comments and I'll tell you. I read that. Let me catch up a couple of times here. Catch up a couple of comments. Helter says the Canadian economy is bad. Many people can't make their loan payments. A strike isn't going to help these GM workers. That was a really dumb move by the union. What they need is a break on their taxes and their property, especially property taxes and property values are crazy in Canada, aren't they? I know there's a couple of people watching from Canada. Chime in, please. Armored says AI-powered strike breakers. Dragon says my sign would say Mexico or bust. Unions are killing our society. And Bingo says quitting time. See you tomorrow. Well, thanks for joining us today. Nature Nerd said for Israel's security and not having missiles launched at them every week and to become a legit nation, they need to take over the Gaza Strip in the long run. It's a Bible prophecy too. And they predate the original Palestinians. The Palestinians, or people who call themselves Palestinians now, are not descendants of the original Palestinians, but Israel still predates even them. And yeah, they do get strikes constantly. That's why they have the Iron Dome, because missile strikes come in all the time. And I'm talking big missiles, not somebody with a RPG or something. Chris says parading dead bodies as trophies, beheading babies, burning people to death, kidnapping Holocaust victims, not a good look. No, it's not. No, it's not. And Chris says, I once went up to some black Hebrew Israelites who were protesting outside a Miami Starbucks, and when I filmed them, they freaked out and yelled profane obscenities at me. Yeah, they can get nasty. And Chris said, lots of black supremacists who claimed they were the first indigenous people in America and invented everything. I read an article the other day that was claiming, because there's a book out, claiming that black people are the indigenous people of Great Britain and that they built Stonehenge. But there's zero evidence to support that any archaeological evidence that they can find of human remains, it's Caucasian people. And I'll tell you here in a second what the question is, and I've gotten yelled at a couple of times for it. Fluke Man says, think Iran did keep their promise to spend $6 billion for the greater good. What's good in Iran Islamic eyes are evil to us. Biden was just too senile to see it. That's a good point. The question is, do you speak Hebrew? I have not yet run across a so-called Hebrew Israelite that speaks or reads the language. And that's the one thing that has been consistent throughout the Hebrew people's history, is that they have clung to the language, even when all else was lost or forgotten. Even in the Bible days, if you read the Bible, if you read the story of Josiah, when their people had even forgotten their laws, they still had their language and they've clung to it to this very day. The language has not really changed at all. And you're claiming that you're the real Jew, you're the real Hebrew person, because the Jew's not really a correct term. It's Hebrew, but you're claiming you're the real Hebrew people and you're taking what's yours back, but you can't be bothered to learn the language. Man, I pissed some people off with that, but they never know the language. They just get angry. Monkey says if people reelect Biden, this is either Sorry, I'm getting jumbled. If people reelected Biden, either the election is very questionable or people like weak leaders. Ali says, did you see the man jumped into the bottom of the 9/11 memorial? No, I did not hear that. I did not hear that. And Nature Nerd said Palestinians have no legit claims anymore to Israel. And all people said the Hebrew Israelite movement, rejected by most American slave descendants, hails from Jamaica in the 1920s. Caribbean leaders like Marcus Garvey promoted that cult. And Monkey says, in case YouTube did not censor, if Biden gets reelected, either the people like weak leaders. Oh, okay, I see what you're saying there. I did a video on that because, in my opinion, if he gets reelected, that proves, it literally proves that it's fixed. If he gets reelected, I'm sure it's rigged. Because there's no way. I mean, he got 81 million votes. I don't believe that. I have a hard time wrapping my mind around that in the first place. That's why a lot of people think that there was some funny business going on. So it's just not realistic that he could get elected again, as unpopular as he is even with his own people. I don't think he was that popular then. The media made it sound like he was, but I don't think a lot of people were really behind it, really behind his election in the first place. So if he gets elected for a second term, yeah, it will absolutely look like fraud. And I got to be careful because it's not something you're really allowed to talk about. Armored wants to know if the real Israelites can please stand up. Nature Nerd said there are too many wars around the world for the U.S. to really respond to anything right now. We can't take care of ourselves. There's only so much running around we can do. You know what I mean? There's only so much. We're spread too thin. And you got to clean up your own house before you can worry about your neighbor. And that's what we're doing. We're running all over the neighborhood, paying people to take care of their homes, and they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing with the money. But then we come home and our place is falling apart. Chris says there are 52 Muslim countries in the Middle East, Africa, and Asia, but they want to exterminate the one Jewish place. And it's just old grudges that go all the way back to biblical times. Because again, these people do not let anything go. There are groups in Egypt that still bear a grudge, and I'm not kidding, still bear a grudge for the Exodus from the Bible, from the Exodus, that hold Israel accountable for that, for looting Egypt like 5,000 years ago. And again, it sounds like I'm making it up, but that they're that crazy with that kind of stuff. Chris said most people can't afford rent, food, gas, etc. Yeah, and they're tax us to death to keep funding the whole rest of the world for stuff that most of it we need to mind our own damn business. And Chris said the Ukrainians are better taken care of than American taxpayers, but they're being taken care of by American taxpayers. That's the problem. And Monkey said, watch China start the war with Taiwan at this moment. Yo, yeah. When everyone else is too spread thin to do anything about it. Exactly. And all people said most continental United States slave descendants reject the Hebrew Black Israelites cult in favor of Christianity, which tends to get rejected by the Caribbean. Yeah, a lot of them don't like that. They don't trust these guys. And I could get further into it because I know something about that whole movement. But again, that's the one way to shut them down. Can you speak Hebrew? Can you read it? Do you read a Hebrew text? Do you read the Old Testament? I mean, they'll get pissed. But yeah, you want to claim it back. But you just want to claim the blessings that the Bible implies from time to time, which you have to work for. You don't just get them. And there are curses as opposed to the blessings for if you're not doing right. People don't like talking about that either. You just want to claim, you just want to cut and paste out of the Bible, but you don't want to learn the language. Ali said the Greek Navy has been put into heightened readiness as being deployed along the side of U.S. Gerald R. Ford. The Greek Navy needs to make sure that no more illegal immigrants get into their country. And Nature Nerd says America has short memories, but the rest of the world holds grudges for centuries. That is exactly right. And a couple more here, and I got to wrap up. Loyal says, I saw a report of a Ukraine official that bought his daughter a $780,000 home as a wedding gift. Weddings are in Ukraine right now. Expensive ones. Very expensive one. Fantastic. But I'll remind everybody who is listening and not watching, you can find me on YouTube. It's Coffee Talk on YouTube, or more specifically at Coffee Talk Live on YouTube, or Prepper University on YouTube, as well as at Coffee Talk Chat on Twitter, or fistfulofradio.com. Please find me on fistfulofradio.com, podcasting out of Atlanta, where you can hear me on Monday through Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and Friday at noon, also Eastern Standard Time. And again, special thanks to the warden for making a donation to the channel. Very much appreciated. And with that, I will go ahead and sign off. Hope everybody got something out of the stream and got something out of the conversation. Thanks to everybody for joining us today. And we will be doing this again tomorrow.